Welcome to the Compass Conversations podcast. We're a community of professional peers who love learning with and from each other. In other words, we choose collaboration over competition. Every conversation here is organic. Even the opening topic isn't settled until 5 minutes before we hit record. And the rest is riffing off of each other's brilliance. Thanks for hanging out with us in a new paradigm of learning, teaching, and expansion, where presence and non-competitive conversation create the space to learn without having to be schooled. Please visit compassconversations.com to discover more about this peer community and to include yourself as a sponsor. Okay, welcome everybody to our next Compass Conversation. I'm Carrie Lake, and today I'm here with Kathy Price, Tony Lander, Francie Herdelandi. Is that right? I hope I said that right. Close enough. Okay, good. Jessica White Plume and Greta Matos. And as always, we begin our conversation with an invocation. So I will share that and then start into where our conversation is going to begin today. These conversations are shared from our sense of connection, camaraderie, and love. This community of peers is curious to learn from and with one another, living, learning, and leading by example. We're exploring together, acknowledging the interspecies family on this planet, while lovingly including ourselves in the family of life from the heart, for the heart. I love that every time. I love it every time.
Nice.
So our starting point today will be just an exploration of curiosity and an experience around intuitive learning. What we talked about a little bit is, each of us on our shared journeys here, those of us that remain curious our whole lives, I think it's pretty common that we've each needed a good relationship with our intuitive sense in order to build what we've built, in order to see in between existing structures, in order to explore the reality of what doesn't yet exist that we would like to bring to life. And so that's for me at the heart of everything that I do. My whole life has been just sort of plucking things out of the universe because I think it sounds great and I think we would all enjoy it, and then offering it to other people. But I'm always curious to hear about other people's journeys. Like how does your intuition occur to you? I know there's a lot of people listening and a lot of conversation out in the world for how do you trust intuition? How do you tell the difference between intellect and intuition? How do they work together? And there's an irony in there that it's, our intuitive awareness, our intuitive sense is paradoxically unique to each of us, but also there's something similar to the way humanity moves with intuition. So these are the things I would love for us to explore today and hear from you. However, that little opening might have inspired your thoughts. And as always, the conversation can go wherever it wants to go, just to enjoy each other's company and see what we're curious to play with. So what do you think?
Well, I'm happy to start. I think, if that's okay with everybody, she says, jumping in. I remember hearing and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to quote it, but it's intuition is knowing something that you know, but you didn't know that you knew. That it was sort of, it's there. And when you feel it, you go, oh, yes, but you don't know where it's come from. You don't know where the information has come from. And it's been a I love the way you said about using, the difference between intuition and intellect, because for me now, I think when I find my intuition is when I go quiet and I'm aware and I notice. So some things will keep coming up, and it'll be, oh yeah, there's the path. It's almost like the breadcrumbs. You follow the trail, that, oh, that's the next bit, and there's the next bit. And like you said, knowing when to trust, for me, that's practice in some ways, because I come from a really scientific background, complete skeptic. And basically my horse took me to a horsemanship clinic, 21 years ago, and that one weekend was the change. So I went from the, prove it, replicate it, measure it, to I have no idea what is going on. And it was all about the energy. So I've learned to trust that, in that was such a major shift in that one thing. It was like, okay, now, and books fall open on pages and you read things and go, oh, there's the next bit. I'm also a great one that if I was driving along the road the other day and I thought a seagull was going to come into my car, because it sort of came straight at me at road level. And I went, oh, okay, need to look up what a seagull means. Things like that. I follow the trail. I just find it totally fascinating, to watch for any little sign and be completely open. It's not like a fixation. Oh, there's a seagull. That means this is, whatever it says, that is it. No, it's so, okay, let's go look. Is there a hint there? Is there something that resonates with me inside? Now I feel it's sort of in my heart and solar plexus. But if I find something that is sort of wham bam, this is the truth, it's straight down the back of the neck, hackles up like, oh my God, yeah, I found it. This is the next step. So for me, answering a couple of questions there, it's practice makes perfect. It's being open and aware and not judgmental. Just go, okay, let's just see what does that mean. And then the intuition and the intellect, I think, can go hand in hand, in that the intuition can give you the idea, and then the intellect of what we have already learned can help us bring that idea to fruition. So, in our work and things like that.
Oh, I love that, Kathy. Thank and like it makes me want to I want to hold it. It's kind of like I just came back from Peru and I was working in
Oh.
cotton supply. That's this Pima cotton and it's so soft. Like and you touch it and you're like, it's so soft. I can't believe it. Like I haven't touched something that's this soft. And what you're saying feels like that to me right now. So I love it that way. And it connects also to what popped in for me, Carrie, as you were speaking, and also in this thread of that beautiful inquiry of intuition and intellect and how they relate and how you discern where they are arriving from and through you. And what came in for me was an experience I had last year where I was invited to speak at this conference. And it was a gathering of educators who are integrating nature into all different kinds of education approaches. So some traditional schooling, other aspects, a lot of different approaches. And of course, I was approached because of the work that I do with horses. And so I said, well, can I take them out into the field? Because that's the essence. And they said, yeah, that's what we would love that. It was a big group. It was like 30 people. And much of my work I do with herds, fully at liberty. And so it was a lot of energy. And I generally, I've lived in Chile for 10 years, but I speak intuitive Spanish. I don't speak intellectual Spanish because I came to Spanish later in life. And it's a whole other story about my shadow perfectionist healing work is all in my Spanish. And anyway, at first they asked me, would you like an interpreter to work with you? And I said, yes, because that will that's grace to me, where I don't have to worry about my Spanish.
And I spent kind of the first 2 days of the conference with this interpreter, hearing her do interpretation. And she did a little for me, and then I heard her interpret me, and I realized it didn't feel like my intuitive Spanish, because she was speaking intellectually. She was transmitting it intellectually. And so it didn't resonate for me when I heard her repeat what I was saying, but in her interpretation. And so I just stopped her and I said, I'm going to go in Spanish. And it was remarkable because it flowed. I never hit any bumps. It was not coming from my mind, and it was coming so fully from my intuitive heart, and with my heart, like it came through my heart. And so everyone could feel me and the essence of what we were doing through what was coming through, even though my Spanish wasn't perfect. And I was weaving my concepts together in very unconventional ways. And again, I just did this in Peru and in a very corporate context, in factories and, with workers and with people of all different backgrounds. But because I chose to allow my intuitive Spanish to come through as opposed to my intellectual, we all left every meeting with our hearts like bursting, and it was incredible.
I've just got to say, I love the idea of an intuitive language. Oh my goodness. Sorry, that's just really, oh, what fun I could have in Welsh. Wow, yes.
Well,
Yes.
go ahead, Jess.
Oh, oh, so many thoughts of just, I guess, a couple of bubbles that have come up. One is that process that you spoke of, Greta, so beautifully, where there's a switch that happens within us so often. A lot of us who are, like you said, we've kind of come to practice hearing our intuition and come to practice moving on it, and that has helped us in many ways to get to where we are. And I recognize for myself the process where you spoke of, at first you thought, intellectually you should have this interpreter, like that makes sense, it's logical, and there's certain reasoning and expectations that we have in our minds of certain scenarios that guides us to often make decisions, right? Where there is the internal voice, the intuition that's happening, and there's so oftentimes a point of a program, if you will, or and not always negative, but just hoping to please and wanting to do the right thing, and not in any overt, just kind of on automatic, just happens so automatically. And it's always such a blessing, such a treat to be like, oh wait, I noticed that I did this, and then I noticed I also have an intuition of going in this direction, and in your case, the beautiful intuitive language. And the moment of letting go, that moment of letting go of whatever the internal expectation was or external, and just letting go and be like, oh, right. The universe, the flow, it's already free, and this beautiful door is open. And to me, that's always such a joyous feeling. And then it's affirming to everybody and everything around when it's kind of a release. And I'm speaking for myself, but I guess I recognize it in the story, and that's always such a joyful process for me. And but I love this concept of intellect and intuition. I had this beautiful thing happen yesterday, and it's kind of personal, but it totally rings, so we're going to share it. So my I am originally from Pine Ridge, like I said, and my husband is from Fort Berthold, and so they're people think, kind of put native stuff together, and but they're actually very, very different tribes. But he had been grown up and doing some ceremonies and things under the wing and love of his grandmother. And when we met, we learned that his grandmother studied with one of my grandfathers in Pine Ridge. And so the way he did things, the way he sang songs, and the way he did, you know, the protocols and stuff, it felt so familiar to me. And when we learned that, it was so, it just really meant a lot. And so many different levels, just to stay connected in that way. So that was really, really special. And I mean, that was years ago when we met, but it remains a special piece of our relationship. So now, yesterday, this video surfaces of this grandpa of mine, who was also the mentor to Marty's grandma. And it's a video of him sharing this old ancient, basically an origin story of the people, in this case, the Lakota, but it's an origin story of the Lakota and the buffalo. And I remember my dad telling us this story and I remember, honest to goodness, being authentic, right? I remember thinking it sounded weird. And it was contrary to other ones that we have about Wind Cave in the Black Hills, and that's where the people came out. But he was always telling us a story about, like, there was, before we were people, there was like a little blood clot on the ground. And I was like, what? I don't know, Dad. I don't know, but I'm listening and I'm going to remember. I'm going to try to be respectful. And there was like a blood clot, and this buffalo came and recognized it. And it was like a tiny voice, he said. And the buffalo came and recognized this tiny voice. And they were so strong and had so much endurance, had so much to offer, that they mentored this tiny little speck on the ground, this tiny voice that they heard. Anyway, I was like, okay, I'm not sure what to make of this, but I always remember that. And so now I see this video online, which is a bizarre twist, of our grandpa, Pete Catches, telling the same exact story, same way. It's a little tiny voice. And so, like, multiple ways, I was like, wow, so touched again, because of the family connection between my dad and my husband. But then it also dawned on me way later, sometimes I'm a little slow on the uptick, way later, it dawned on me that this was another take on what is called evolution. So regardless of anybody's views on it, I just thought it was so, it's literally spirit and intellect and intuition overlapping each other, because they're talking about a growth of a small, seemingly unintelligent organism into what had become a human being. And some explain it with these words, and some explain it with these other words. And Lakota explained it with that buffalo came and gave us the strength to grow into what we have become. So obviously there's a lot there, but I was just like, oh, wait, this is what they would call evolution. But it didn't feel contrary to me. Again, it felt like a beautiful, like, oh, just like a beautiful intermingling of intellect and intuition and spirit, if that makes sense. And maybe that's because I'm such a happy place now, and that's how it felt to me. And at the same time, I'm recognizing that my little, very humble ability to sense anything is so small compared to the larger movings and connections that are always at work, because I couldn't have thought of those connections. But I'm always just so grateful that they are there. And I believe in that vibration of the gratitude has me noticing more of those things that are just mind blowing. Maybe no pun intended there. Gosh, that was a lot of words. But sorry, but
No,
this
sorry.
literally just happened, and I was like, oh, it's like academics and spirit, like literally just, can I just see my fingers? They're like together.
It's beautiful, Jess. Tony and Francie, I want to just leave a little space if you have anything you want to toss in, and if not, you can barge in later.
Well, maybe I have a thought, especially hearing Kathy and Jessica talking about your thoughts really connected with me, also thinking with being kind of intuitive really allows us so much more to be kind of free and self-authentic. Because if we think about the opposite of being more intellectual, feels more like the school likes to bring us up in that way, and then the older we grow, the more we kind of feel we have to be that way, because being intuitive mostly doesn't really fit in, right? And then with being intellectual, kind of feeling like you have to follow all these rules and regulations, that you kind of try to become someone you're not really be, or you don't want to be that person, and that really constrains you and makes you feeling probably, or for me it was like that, frustrated. And if we take it back to the horses, also thinking about it, that the more I felt I have to be intellectual, the more I disconnected with my horse, and the more, or they started the process of disconnecting with the kind of love I had for that horse, because I felt like I had to achieve whatever. And I think the more we can let go of this and be intuitive and feel that kind of what you talked about, the between the lines, and feel how we can feel ourselves and the other being, in that case the horse, really can bring up that love and connection again, which actually gives us these great feelings, right? Because I think with being so intellectual, I think the horse world is really stuck in that. Not only the horse world, I guess. But it's really, yeah, I really love to think about this, and think about also my own journey. When have I been more intuitive? And then it's really easy for me. I directly feel different in my body, that I was a different person, more happy, more just free, more myself. And then against this, with the intellectual, it directly kind of constrains me. And it's really cool to think about it, and hearing you talking about that.
Thank you. And Tony, I'm so curious to hear your perspective too, because you said you spent time as computer guy, and yet here you are as a human developing intuitive ways to share with other people. So please, love to hear whatever is percolating in for you.
Yeah, it's a bit of a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially, I grew up in a house that my father was very mechanical, and everything had a place, and you had to do it in certain ways. There wasn't a whole lot of intuitive, except he was exceptional at finding new ways to do things. So it was kind of, again, a little paradox that I grew up in there. And then, yes, I went into computers, and I found actually I was quite good at it. My analysis skills are really quite good. So I was quite good as a programmer and a systems analyst and things like this. But I hated it, because I felt it was just a computer. It had no feeling. And I didn't know this at the time, but looking back now, I know it was the case that I hated it because it was not a feeling thing. But again, I was living in this paradox, because without putting too much emphasis on my father, he was not really a feeling person. He was more mechanical, not really science, but that way, and not emotional. And so the computers felt similar, but I obviously wanted to live a different way. So it took years and years to get out of this process. But in saying that, like I'm sure all of our histories bring us to a point where we are. And without that experiences, we're not in the place where we are now. So the analysis is also really, really helpful, really cool, because now I can analyze how the horses are going, how I'm going, how it's feeling as well, and not just stuck into a mechanical, it must be this way. And I wanted to go just into another place a little bit on from what Franzi said, I think there's a huge amount of our intuition is suppressed because of beliefs and values and principles that we're brought up with. And so much, like we talk about this to our students as well, but so much of our beliefs are not ours. They're injected into us when we're younger, and especially probably under 5, or at least for sure under 10 years old. We're given these beliefs by people, obviously parents and other people we're involved with, and religion and society and TV, and now, of course, social media. And these beliefs and values then stifle our intuition.
And I think the big issue that we're not aware about this, right?
This is the biggest part. Yeah, we're not aware, but we are aware. Yeah, because you said you felt it.
Yeah.
When it's not working, we are aware of it, but we're not aware enough of it at that time or at that age to be able to change it. So, I mean, some people are lucky and or very intuitive and can change it. It took me years and years and years and years to get to that point where I could finally feel that I could be self-authentic and change these beliefs. And just one example is this belief with horse riding that you have to have a bit in the horse's mouth and then double bits to get this beautiful position. And the classic is the bit is for refinement. And this is the biggest piece of BS in my opinion now, because my belief was you had to do this because I got told this over and over and over. So my belief was, yes, you had to have a bit to have refinement, but it's just rubbish. And I knew inside, I could feel it inside that it was wrong. I didn't want to do it. And it was probably maybe 4 years ago that we decided no more bits. It was just done. So like I said, it took years and years and years. It was only 4 years ago we said no more bits. And you don't have to use a bit. It's just rubbish that you have to. But this is one of the things where our intuition and our beliefs are fighting each other all the time. And of course, intellect, yes. So whether you put intellect with the belief, I think they can be different as well. Like your intellect can even fight your belief, or vice versa. Yeah. So it's a huge subject for sure. And I think, Kerry, you, even though we've only known you for a very short time, I mean, I think you again have added to my security or my self-authentic belief in myself that I can be intuitive, or that I am intuitive, or whatever you want to call it, because there is so much intellect, so much belief, so much experience saying that it must be done in a certain way, that it's, but there's still the part inside that's saying, you know, it's fighting inside saying, no, you don't. This is not right. You can do it another way. So it's really cool to be amongst you people, you lovely people, intuitively living and kind of almost, if you like, fighting society or fighting the in a way, to find out there's another way to live. It's really cool.
I think also the interesting thing is, which just came up now in my mind, is that if we think about our child dream about the horses, and if we think about how these movies are done, like Fury, for example, there's so much intuitive in there.
Portrayed as if there is, yeah.
Yes, they make it up.
Yeah.
But this kind of really, I think, matches with, I guess, how all of us wanted to live with the horses.
Yes.
Not with the intellectual, mechanical behavior, because I cannot imagine that there's one horse lover out there who had this on day one in their mind that they want to be really mechanical and this is the way.
Right.
This amazing feeling.
Right.
But then it takes you on this whole different path, which is, yeah, leading you to a way where you don't get the feeling you want. So it's just a conundrum.
Well, you know, for hundreds of years, society, human society, in, you know, industrialized cultures, there's the word, it's been industrialized, and beliefs have been put in place that what's important is production. What's important is survival. What's important is gaining, creating, selling, having, now influencing, and everything that is abstracted into our mind. And so the beliefs and the education, what I see they steer our awareness away from what is experienced and felt and toward what can be defined and measured and repeated and spoken of, in a definition sort of a way. When what I hear you pointing to, and I'm completely with you, Francie, that Fury, oh my God, just the first episode of Fury was like, yes. And even the dad listened to the little boy at the end of the episode, you know, instead of listening to the mean ranch hand, you know. There, whatever training it took to get to that point, it touches our hearts because it awakens the part of ourselves that feels, right, that intuition knows, before we have to be taught, right? And so my question is always, how do we integrate an education of the heart or an education of intuitive knowing side by side with the intellect? Because clearly we need that. We need the intellect to function because it serves, language serves, science serves, analysis serves, like, you know, all of us are pointing out. But that's my question is, and where my heart is taking everything I create, is how do we weave and bring side by side with intellect the value of the way intuition functions, because it's almost like two different languages that complement each other, like a harmony, like a duet, but they operate differently and they feel different.
Mhm. Yeah, I have to thank Carrie also for just your phrase. I think that I heard the first time at the first Schiller Summit that your intellect is at the service of your heart. So not just that it is that the heart was the feel of it, and of course it's because you were expressing it, but the feel of it wasn't like the heart is more important, but that the intellect is also a really treasured and valued helper or servant, however we want to say that, one that we treasure and respect and love, but is also at the service of the heart. That's the feel of it with the way that you express it, and I really try to carry that along because it's it felt really right and good the way that you said that. But yeah, that is the ultimate question, right? Because we're all somewhat operating in institutions to more or less different degrees at different times, and at times we would like to just erase those. I would be all for just like, let's go back to camping and, you know, getting my water from a spring and taking supplies around in the winter on the horseback. At moments I have moments like that, but but also, like you said, there's so many, you know, there's beauty in the analysis, and there's beauty even, I think about like math, if we're talking about the computers and the math and people who really are gifted with that, there's a dance and an art there as well. And I think you're asking the right questions, and I want to be around to hear the discussion because I have the same question.
You know, I think in the business world and in tech, there's a concept of servant leadership that is gaining more and more popularity, very much so in the Bay Area, in California Bay Area. I live in California and have connections in that world. And I think in the context of business going forward, servant leadership is pointing at exactly this, at having the intellect serve the heart, like asking the questions, why are we doing what we're doing, and letting the why be more valuable than the end product. And I see lots and lots of movement in that direction, and it makes me very happy. I also get super curious, like, okay, how do we bring them out to the horses? So that, you know, their bodies can have that experience, not just doing the intellectual analysis that servant leadership works based on data collected, but, you know, it's one of my fantasies to to provide tools and experience for people in these worlds that are building the systems, you know, that humanity is going to utilize, to give the humans building the systems their own cellular experience of having a horse's heart reach in and touch them in a way that you can't know until you know it, until you experience it.
Harry,
think
that brings up for me this. Sorry, do you want to
No,
go?
carry on, carry on, carry on.
Don't lose it. Hold on to it.
Yeah, I'll hold it.
Please. But what comes up for me that I find really curious, because I shared for many years, and I still share it, because my favorite place to be all the time is out in the field with the horses. And many years ago, when I had left kind of the conventional corporate world, I was quite fierce in my decision that I was going to spend the rest of my life out in the field with the horses. And yet I had loved very deeply a lot of the work and the space and what emerged in my corporate work and in that environment. And so I thought intellectually and intuitively, but very intellectually, I'll just bring them together. And I'm humble enough that I've also surrendered my kind of full force egoic control of my life, that I allow it to take me where it's meant to take me, so I don't resist too much. But in my life, very clearly said, yeah, don't worry, the herd's not going anywhere, the land's not going anywhere, and you've got to go other places too. It happened only after basically 2 years of being repetitively told by people who would come out in the field with me and the horses that I was like being with the horses. And it's not because I've become like the horses, it's because I'm embodying our intuitive capacity that the horses embody so easily, you know? And that's what it reflected back to me, that it wasn't, and it's not like I claim that that's how I live and I'm like, you know, Zen all the time, but it gave me a mirroring effect that allowed me to inhabit all the spaces that were calling me into them, even if the space wasn't ready to go out in the field. And I still bring the horses into those spaces as much as I can. But it's remarkable, because I just wanted to add that, and I believe that what the horse heart is invoking within us, it's alive within us. It's reconnecting us to what's in us already. And so then if we nurture that and acknowledge it, it's not coming actually from outside of us, right? It's just bringing it all in again and reminding us we're all in it. It's all of us.
Which is why I love Tony being so selfish on your journey and taking it first for yourself, so you have it for others. But now I want to go to Kathy.
Yes. Oh goodness, I mean, there's so much. All of you have said so. I've got notes and notes and notes here, so I promise I'll keep it brief. But I loved what you just said, Greta, about reconnecting to our heart, how our horses show us that. And for me, some of the one of the things that a train that's been going through the conversation is the authenticity about us being who we're meant to be. And that's what the intuition is also showing us, that who am I? What am I? What is the next step? What am I meant to be doing? And I had that moment of realization in about 2015. I'd always needed a title behind me, or, you know, a practitioner of this or a whatever of that. And a circumstance that I went to, which was like a recertification weekend, was, excuse the French, but the biggest load of bullshit I'd ever gone to. And it was, okay, there was my intuition, there was my marker to say, okay, now have you got the message? I do realize that I sometimes need a 4x2 around the head from the universe to go, oh, okay, yeah, I've got it now. So that was the moment of change. And for me, it's about stepping into integrity and authenticity. And the authenticity is just what you said. What is in your heart? Who are you meant to be? And yet it's a journey to find that. And it's not judging yourself for every step of it, that you might take a little bit of a blind turn, but there's no such thing as failure. It's information. And you go, okay, that wasn't the right place. Okay, but I've got that information now not to do that, or that was really interesting. There's something I might need later. But so the authenticity is I am me, and I'm okay with being me. And I'm not going to let anybody else judge me about being me. It's a really beautiful, powerful place to be when you can just sit in yourself and go, well, here I am. Take it or leave it, you know, in that respect. And the integrity part I find is so powerful. You only know what you know at that precise moment. And if 5 minutes later somebody shows you a better way of doing something, you can't beat yourself up. You did not know it. And so I found now not to judge myself. Well, one tries not to judge oneself. You know, I have apologized to my horses many, many, many times. But it's a case of there's a peace within you. And Francie, I loved what you said about how you felt, you can feel in you the constraint. And I think that's a wonderful marker for us. You know, maybe people stepping forward, listening to this conversation, that when you go to do something and you feel that tightness, or you feel that brace in you about, ooh, you know, you're talking about whether you're in a different job or something, and you know it's a good job, but there's something that's telling you it might not be the right one. Is to take note of it. And it may not be that you can immediately step out into what you need to do, but that's information. And I often say my journey through this world of energy has been a 20-year journey. It took me about 15 years to get to the point where I could step more into it, and maybe 20 years till I could really go, hallelujah, here I am. But it worked alongside the whole time. I never lost it. There was energy going in it all of the time. But I realized I had to do something else to keep the wolf from the door. We were farming, so I had to work on the farm, which was, great, no worries. But yeah, I just find that the authenticity is the really powerful, and listening to your intuition about every little bit of information that comes. This is who I am. This is it. Should I go and sit in the field with the horses? Yeah, that's the way it is. But then you realize there are other nuances to how you do that. So I'm just loving this conversation. Thank you.
I'll just jump in as well there. Kathy mentioned what I wanted to talk about, the judging. And I think, Kathy, you were more on judging yourself a little bit. But going back to what you said, Kerry, about education, like we know now that the education, when it was started 100 and something years ago, was about getting troops for the industry and for the factory. So they didn't want people with intuition. They didn't want people having thinking, right? You had to just do what was said. And so a lot of this, I think, is part of the reason we don't have so much intuition now, because we're told what to think. We're told what to put on the exam paper, and they squash this whole option for thinking. And so then we also go out of school and we're judging because it doesn't match what we was told from the textbook. And
can I add something here?
Okay.
Thank you. Just also what you said already when starting with the school topic is that we learn to ignore these feelings that come up in that stage.
Well, we have to.
And that's then a big measurement, which is really getting ignored if you're on a good path or not, because you keep going anyway,
Right,
even though it feels like not good.
And you get rewarded for doing what they say. You get rewarded for repeating what they told you. Funny about that. So on top of that, then, is we go out of school and we're judging people. We're judging the world. We're judging what this person does or what this person says. Does it match? And it brings us back to beliefs again. But I think the big point is that if we want intuition, we've got to stop judging. Stop judging ourselves, yes, but stop judging everybody else and stop judging the horses, which is easier said than done, like you said, Kathy. it's a tough job, right? But because if we judge something, it doesn't allow for that intuition to come in. It doesn't allow for us to be open for another option or for another answer or for another question, because we cut it off. Any judgment cuts off whatever chance we have of opening up to something else. And as we know over history, and like you said, Kathy, over history, whatever someone has decided or written down can change in 5 minutes or 5 days or 5 years. Who knows? But it's not necessarily truth. It's only somebody's truth at that point. And so the intuition comes in, I think, to help us be more open, more curious, more empathetic, more feeling is really the big part.
It's so exciting. I want to open a little space here because I love how you were just talking about judgment, Tony. Thank you. And here's a question I'll toss out for us is how do each of us know the difference between judgment and discernment? What is it? Because I have my way of talking about it, but I would love to hear you guys. Like, what is in your sense, in your way of relating to the world, the difference between judgment and discernment?
I have a question first because I'm not native speaking English. Can you
Yes.
please explain the difference between these two terms?
Yes.
Judging.
What discernment?
Yes.
Really, what discernment means is what Francie wants.
Yeah, understood. So, as Tony was just talking about, and I'm with you, you're talking about judgment, that it just stops the curiosity. It stops things. There's a feeling that goes with that we may or may not have words for. Discernment, I would describe, I'm sure there's a dictionary definition to it, but I would describe it as considering multiple potentials and choosing one of the multiple to go toward. Okay. And to me, that feels very different. Discernment to me feels like it opens the way for a direction that I could go, where judgment closes the options.
I think I just think, for me, you just hit the nail on the head, Kerry. We have in our Equicid, we have what we call person traits. We've got 13 of them. And the very first row, they're a spectrum. The very first row in the center is open-minded. And this is what you're talking about with intuition and discernment, for me, is open-minded. Yeah. And on the one side of the spectrum, we've got closed-minded. That is judgment, if you want to call it that, but closed-minded, they make a judgment. They say, this is my right, or this is your wrong, or they cut it in black and white, right and wrong. And open-minded, there's no right and wrong. In that case, it's let's think about it, let's discover it, let's try it out. And then with your discernment, if it doesn't fit with us or our beliefs or our values, doesn't feel good to us, then we not.
Yeah.
So it's not wrong, not right. And this is what we really try to do with the horses and the people is there is no right and wrong. There is no black and white.
Right.
So one side, closed-minded, centered, we got open-minded. On the other side, we've got influence-minded. So you go with the latest influencer, whatever's on the social media. This is what's right now. Oh, this is what's right now. Oh, this is what's right now. Or in other words, when we were teaching courses and clinics, these people would come along to the next clinician and then the next clinician and then the next clinician.
Right.
Kind of influence-minded.
So, I love that. See, this to me is a perfect example of weaving intuition and intellect, because when we're talking about discernment, to truly discern asks me to know myself well enough to be able to feel if I have multiple options, why would I choose one over the other? I have to have some sense of my sense that would make me say, well, green instead of purple, right? Or, this horse instead of that horse, or we're going to go with this contractor and not that contractor, or we're going to spend our money this way first before that. It asks me to have some sense of what's going on. And from there, I have the analysis of what's at hand, right? And so having that spectrum in place, it gives the mind a reference point. But when the mind is working in service to the heart is going to say, well, I feel less conflict in this direction. I feel more conflict in that direction. right? So that to me is a beautiful example of having the mind in service to the heart, which Francie, to go back to that question of what is discernment, to me, that's what discernment is. And yeah, but that's why I wanted to hear different ways of talking about it, so that it isn't, we don't make it definition based, you know. Yes, there's a definition for discernment, but there's so many different ways that we relate to it. And I think the more we can bring in the language of relating, then it will help people find their own intuitive connection with what we're talking about, rather than just giving definitions.
And I can imagine, because you now just talked quite a bit about your heart and your feelings kind of in that relation. I can imagine for somebody who is just starting to get aware about all of that, that they don't know what does their heart really say.
Yes.
Or they don't trust it yet.
Yes.
And I can imagine that for the process, that they get away from the judgment and more intuitive, that if they then maybe sit down a bit more mechanically for a short term to think about what are their real own beliefs and values and priorities, to then kind of give that a pause again, put it to the side and go back to their heart. How does it feel in the moment, or their next decision or the next challenge? Kind of swapping between these two could probably helpful and a start for some people.
Absolutely agree. That is the beauty of the intellect. When the mind needs more information in order to trust, then the heart would say, well, let's find the information. Let's give you whatever information you need, so that we can weave together, so that we can go forward feeling clear, open, confident, and be of integrity, like Kathy was talking about. That's, to me, what integrity is the integration of all aspects of me, so I'm no longer in conflict with myself. It if nothing else, then to just take the very next step, right? It doesn't have to be for the rest of my life, because like we've already pointed out, you know, things are going to change. But for the very next step in front of me, that's all that really matters, you know. And when I can take that step in coherence with myself, in a way that I feel congruent, then I am starting to create a very beautiful world that contributes to everything around me.
I'd just like to pick up on that last thing that you said, because when I've done workshops, this is something that comes up a lot, is when people are in a position that they're trying to find the next step, make a change, they see that they have to have the final answer. And when I've brought them back to go, no, just do one, you don't actually have to even know the next step, just change the energy from, oh my God, to, okay, it's there. So in other words, maybe inviting the intuition in so that you begin to feel. And it's been amazing watching people change. It's like aha moments. They're gone, oh my God, because they've always, this is the training of find the answer. You need to know what the end goal is. You need to know it now. And that's shutting down all of the intuition and every step in between. I used to work with a person, a kinesiologist, and she always had people like in two camps, the feel camp and the control. Now I'm a control. I love a spreadsheet. I will also add, really love a spreadsheet, but I'm a real control merchant. And she was feel, and we'd often have discussions about how with what she'd call a feel person would be one that could see every possible permutation out there, and wasn't it amazing? But she'd get nothing done because there were just so many ways of doing, whereas I'd go, okay, A to B, let's go, and then I'd miss all the other permutations. So when we could meet in the happy middle, that's when life really rock and roll. We were really rock and roll because we had the best of both worlds. So yeah, I just think it is what you said, is just the next step. Just feel for the next step and know that's all you can do.
Yeah. That really segues with what come up for me as well, that first of all, that's such a great question, because I think a lot of people think that judgment is discernment, that if I have a really good formula, really good information, that's, there's not a distinction even made there, and that was winning. To have really good judgment was the way to go for, in a lot of contexts and a lot of situations. And so, but not always. But so that was one thing, I guess I wanted to recognize. That's such a good question. But also, one thing that had popped up is that one has a finite answer, and I feel like discernment is a process, a never-ending, infinite process. Like in another group, I think it was Jane who said, one of our lovely, perfect, wonderful friends said, there's no such thing as balance in a finite way. There's only balancing. And that's been kind of picked up on, that you're always balancing. It's always an action, a motion, a process all the time. And of course, that can be taken in many ways, talking about physiology and fitness, and of course our metaphorical and life ways and everything. And it similarly, there was one of the training models that I did a long time ago where in settings with horses and people, and maybe people who aren't used to handling horses, rather than starting and coming forward with in relation to safety, rather than stepping forward and saying, okay, here is the rules for safety, don't walk behind a horse, don't touch the flank, and ABC, and then you'll be safe, which people want. But it was discussed that safety is always a process. It is having that moment to moment intuition. Basically, they didn't say intuition, but they said a moment to moment awareness of what's happening around you. How does your body feel? What is the body language you might notice? And so there's no one definite answer of safety. There's so many iterations, what might be contrary to those rules that seem so comfortable sometimes, where you might or might not be safe, and vice versa. But yeah, kind of like what you're saying now, I think it would add to that discussion that is opening up to the intuition at any one point and changing the energy. Changing the energy a lot to one, because judgment implies that there's a wrong one, right? There's a wrong answer. Whereas the energy that, of course, we always feel from Kathy, which is why we all fangirl on her, is like, there's no such thing as a wrong answer. Lovely. Like, I could say anything in the world, literally, and Kathy would still give me a hug. That's energy, and that just shifts it. And that's a discernment of relationship. Anyway, yeah.
I love just what all of what you said connects so much with everything that all of you are weaving in. It's so beautiful. For me, it relates to this concept that actually goes into our entire conversation, but this shared language is really, really, really important, because judgment and discernment both involve themes that focus on safety and accountability and integrity. And so they're actually quite vital in terms of a healthy society. And I find kind of the action of judging, even when it's internal judgment, but it's still connected to external projection, always. So any kind of judgment, it's an interaction with what's external, outside of us. And whereas discernment activates our internal intuition. And so, for example, if I'm in a field with a horse and the horse kicks at me, my judgment is that horse is dangerous. My discernment says, what do I need to do to be safe around this being right now? What is my sense of my own being with this being that has this potential to hurt me? And that's very different energetically, but that's also a very different frame, right? That we're interacting with. And so I appreciate so much all of what we're bringing in. And because I wouldn't have chosen it, but I have the archetypal judge in my map, my constellation of this timeline. And so, I mean, my corporate work is literally in the world of compliance. And the rules that are there because people don't want children working in factories, you know? They don't want someone to be forced to work. And yet, when it starts to be that someone's making a judgment call based on when we find a child working, for example, if you're only going in and judging, the ramifications of that are usually quite negative, as opposed to going in with discernment and therefore having curiosity about the context and having curiosity about what's needed and why is this occurring. And so I think that it's also important to have an awareness of what our role is in the space. And if our role is to be a judge, if we're literally the judge, be a discerning judge, be a judge that can kind of embody that, right? And otherwise, like, I continuously have that conversation within me of, is this my work? Is this their work? Is this the world's work? Is this the bigger work? And judging is like, there's very little space where that's actually my work, you know? And I know that. So if I hear myself doing it, I'm like, hey, it's not your work. Put that down.
Oh, Greta, you say it so beautifully, and thank you for putting it in that context. Thank you for the story context. I think it makes it easier maybe for people to find a relationship between those words, and hopefully explore with curiosity, not judge. You know, I say to people all the time, like, let's not judge judgment for a second. Let's not make judgment wrong for a second, right? Maybe 10 seconds, just to see what changes in my awareness when I take a break from judging judgment as bad and wrong, right? Because it's so insidious, it's so woven in. It does take courage to have these internal self inquiries, right? But that seems to be the direction that, to me anyway, that is going to open new conversations for humanity, is the curiosity and the courage to have a different conversation. We have about 3 minutes left that we could probably continue for a long time. So thank you all for sharing your presence and your wisdom. And I just want to open the space for any final thoughts or curiosities or anything at all that you'd like to do to round the conversation out and bring us home.
My cheeks are aching because I'm smiling so much. So it's just it's been such a joy just to be in this conversation with all of you. And obviously my heart, you can all feel my heart. I know that. So you can feel how it feels, and it's nice. So I'm just appreciating all of this space. So thank you again, Carrie, for inviting me in, and everyone for your beautiful essence of you that I got to play with today.
Thank you, love. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I love to, this is why I love the format of the just organic conversation, because we all come from different places and we get to explore what's different. But when we all come from a place, first and foremost, committed to our own heart, feeling our own heart, being willing to share what's true in our own heart, it creates a different space for the conversation to happen in. So I thank you all for leading by example on this, and being willing to share this beautiful, amazing connective space out through the podcast platform. Thank you guys so very much. And we'll look forward to the next time we get together as this group or mix and match with another group. So thank you so much, everybody.
And you, Carrie.
Karen. Thank you so
Thank
much.
everyone else.
Yeah.
Chris Bass.